Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with our weekly P&Q&C&A&T videos. This is season 6, episode 7. For those of you who don't remember or are joining us new, that's podcasts and questions and comments and answers and talking. And I said videos, but I should also mention that these will exist in purely audio form as a podcast that you can access using any one of the methods in the description. Before we get into the questions, we have some housekeeping from last week.
Well, actually, there's a few things we should probably mention too, that we pull these questions and comments from the videos themselves. So every once in a while people ask, well, how do I get a question on your Q&A or Q&C&A&T or P&C P&Q
P&Q&C&A&T. Yeah, there we go. And so some housekeeping from last week. Edwin Felix was also one of our patrons who wanted podcasts and likes listening to this in podcast format, but I believe that we learned about that after the podcast already started going up.
Yeah, but it's not just iProphet. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also just for the video end of this, your finger is still in the splint.
Yes, it is. Okay, so here's a ridiculous, and I know, all right, so you taught me an expression, that's a weird flex. And
no, that's not the expression I taught you.
Isn't it?
Although it bears some resemblance. The expression that I taught you is weird flex, but okay.
Weird flex, but okay. All right, yeah, okay. Weird flex, but okay. It's the idea that flexing is that kind of preening and ostentatious display, or you're just sort of showing off. Yeah. And it's not so much showing off, but that because of the splint and because my dominant hand, my right forearm is normally visibly bigger than my left. Now my right forearm is visibly smaller than my left after 3.5 weeks of not being able to grab anything properly because of the splint.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous, but it's also a reminder that the gameplay is affected. So when you see that the teams, maybe it's a combination of that plus, I guess, also that sometimes the device just doesn't register the touches. So every once in a while you see a fight where nothing is happening except the other team is beating the crap out of us. That's what's happening.
Yeah. So there we go, and I think that's everything. So let's get right into our first question from Tropical Winter, and this is short and sweet. They say, "Can you get sued for hacking?"
And that was a comment from our video, "Will blank get me banned?" And I think the short answer really is you can get sued for anything. The real question, I think, is whether you'll be successfully sued. Although maybe that's not entirely true, because for a lot of people, the act of getting sued can be traumatic itself. Even if you ultimately win, defending yourself from a lawsuit can be really expensive and really stressful. But I think in the case of getting sued for hacking, I think it seems relatively unlikely, because the value of, I guess, first you'd have to have somebody who's unequivocally hacking. So it can't just be a user.
Yeah.
I think it would have to be one of those people that advertises and sells hacking services. Because the last thing you want to do, like, that's the kind of Barbra Streisand effect, right? Where you get the bad publicity, where you sue one of your users who might have ended up with a lot of stuff because of a glitch in the game, or because they were one of your whales and they bought a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think it seems really unlikely. I mean, they've already got lots of reasons, or sort of lots of effective punishments that they already, push, right? Where your account gets banned, and that's probably more appropriate for the kind of offense. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, for the amount of money that they invest into injustice and how much they hope to make out of it, it seems like it would be a big waste of their time. I mean, who knows though? Remember, were you aware of when this happened, Napster, and they sued a bunch of the end users who were downloading MP3s?
Yeah, to make examples of them.
Yeah, and they were charging, maybe there's like a handful of people that they sued for, like, I don't know, tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, there was like a joke. Weird Al Yankovic did like a joke song about that, where it's like called "Don't Download This Song," just like demonizing people who downloaded music for free. And it was like saying that if you did it, you would end up in federal prison, like the hardened criminal you were.
Yeah.
Like the whole idea of making an example.
I think the underlying lesson, I guess, is that if you really are worried about cheating or doing glitches, you probably shouldn't do them.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is still a fun game even without it. It's just that the level of frustration sometimes, which maybe we focus on, that's the real F word when it comes to injustice. The potential for frustration is higher when you actually have to do all the grinding.
Yeah.
But it's still a fun game. I mean, I was grinding before we even had glitches, I was grinding for close to a year, right?
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, at the end of the day, can you get sued? Maybe. Almost certainly you won't get sued. I mean, can you get sued? Yes, you can. There's no reason you can't get sued for something super frivolous. I mean, it would be damaging to whoever was doing it to you, and that's a deterrent, which makes it less likely, but there's nothing that actually prevents them from doing it.
Yeah. And I think the kinds of punishments that people get for filing a lot of frivolous suits doesn't actually happen until you get to the point where, you know, it's something significant. It can't be just like one or two or whatever. Like there's, you know, when you hear about the guys that are actually, there's a court order against them from filing another suit without judge approval. Mm-hmm. That happens very rarely, and usually when that happens, it's because they've done like dozens and dozens of suits.
Yeah, there's like that woman or something who had just enough law school knowledge. I believe she wasn't actually like a lawyer, but went to law school for long enough that she knew the ins and outs just to basically be a pain in the butt to anybody that she could be and represent herself.
Mm-hmm.
And she was just suing everybody all the time. Yeah,
representing yourself is it's cheap if you don't value your time.
Yeah.
And it makes it really hard to I mean, if you're going to, you know, it's like one of those things, if you're not going to defend yourself properly, sure, it's going to be cheap, but if you end up losing, that's going to be worse. And when people do it properly, the person who gets sued ends up suffering for it, right?
Yeah, and I think in her case, she actually was trying to do it vaguely properly, but properly just in the sense that she was just trying to make it difficult for anybody that she was suing, right? I think her goals were just misaligned with the general goals of the legal system.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I am not a lawyer, but you know, I think in certain jurisdictions they actually have lawsuits against that kind of stuff, or it's not lawsuits, they have legislation and laws against that kind of stuff. Ooh, this is going to be fun because Killing Joke Joker is front, and a lot of other teams you'd be tempted to try to wait until he tags out, but with the team that we're playing right now with the Splash team, you just motor through them because not only is Luchador being going to be able to knock out Joker, he's going to do a bunch of hits on the next guy, maybe knock him out, and the hits will buy you the time so that you can engage your special again before they do a super. So anyways, yeah, I think we've exhausted that suing question. I mean, if this was a legal kind of podcast, we'd probably have more to say.
Well, I've been watching a lot of Suits recently, which is like a legal kind of it's a like episodic show where they especially in the first season deal with like approximately like one case an episode. And so I think I've got a little more law in the mind than I would normally, but yeah, I think we probably exhausted that well still, because we just don't have the expertise. Our opinion at the end of the day isn't really worth much.
Yeah, but as a user, I mean, we're probably more likely to get sued than the end user, and we are less likely to get sued than actual hackers who sell their services.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So our next question, this one comes from a recap video where we talked about the challenge requirements being easier for certain challenges. This was a challenge that had bronze, I think, for all of them. And we also talked about no challenge requirements for occasional challenges. And so Gregory324 replied saying, on the challenge requirements, when things are made easier, that way people tend to feel cheated in a way if they did it the hard way. So it's like if a boss fight in a game was incredibly hard and you took a long time to beat it, then the devs realized how hard the boss was, so they lowered the difficulty. For whatever reason, even though you are past the boss fight and don't have to do it anymore, you feel cheated in a way because the newer players don't have to go through the tough boss fight you did. I think that's totally true. I think that's definitely like a phenomenon.
Well, it's the anchoring, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we talked about that before, where part of it is what your expectations are, and if you've started off a certain way, people like you explain the concept to me again.
Yeah. The example in game specifically was World of Warcraft, where they changed. You used to get XP reductions if you played too long, because they wanted to encourage you to take breaks, and then instead they changed it so that you got well rested bonuses, and so it's the exact same system, but they just said you got bonus XP for the first while that you played every certain period of time. So flipping the system on its head made it feel like a reward instead of like a punishment. But I think in this case, the anchoring effect is just like what you're used to first. It's the what happens when you get your foot in the door, and it's like this works in bargaining. It's a psychological kind of tactic that you can use where you start, and whatever you start on, even if it's unreasonable, the anchoring effect just means that it shifts kind of what your average perception is. It's the same way that the Overton window works in politics, where even if there's somebody saying something absolutely ridiculous and you know that you don't agree with them, it can shift what you think is reasonable dialogue by just scaling that ridiculousness enough steps back without necessarily not being ridiculous in and of itself.
This was kind of a related lesson, I think, that we talked about with you in life. And I guess we talk about it in general too, that the better thing to do is always to underpromise and overdeliver. It's the same idea, right?
Yeah.
Where if you promise a lot, and you don't deliver, or you deliver just that, then people are either disappointed or they're just, that's what you said you'd do.
Yeah, because you're just meeting expectations.
Right, but if you promise, and the promise that you make is reasonable, you promise, but less than what you think you're going to be able to do, then you have a better chance of over-delivering, whether it's promising that you're going to come in at a certain time and then you come in early. It's like, even Amazon packages, right? If there's a delivery estimate, and, whenever you bought it, whatever the delivery estimate was, we would have just accepted it, right?
Yeah.
But then if it's early, you think, oh, cool, it's early. And if it's late, you think, goddamn Amazon, what are you doing to me?
Yeah, no, I think that's true for sure. And I think part of where the frustration comes from is that people, I think, separate from feeling cheated, they feel like they weren't even told what their options were, right? It's like if because when they came to whatever the challenge they had to overcome, let's talk about like a really hard boss fight in a game, right? That's the example that Gregory uses here. If somebody gets to a really hard boss fight in a game and they just struggle away and they hack at it for hours and hours and they finally beat it, they're doing that because they're under the impression that they either beat it or they don't continue. And there's a hidden third option that they don't realize, which is wait for a certain amount of time, and the problem will effectively resolve itself. And so then when people are beating it after, I think more than just the fact that other people don't have to do it, it's that you didn't realize that you also didn't have to do it. Is that you didn't realize that there was like an option afforded to you, and that basically by being unlucky or starting playing when you did or getting to that section when you did, you were penalized.
So there's got to be exceptions to that, because I'm thinking specifically of Arkham Origins Batman the boss fight.
Yeah.
And how originally it was harder because it would disable all passives.
Yeah.
And they've changed that, so it's no longer disable all passives. You get all your passives, and it's almost easy, and I miss that. I guess not because it was so hard, but because it was challenging, but still doable.
Yeah, and I mean that, I think that has more to do with the nature of the challenge and whether it's fun or frustrating, right? There's like games like a game that I've actually started playing again recently is Dark Souls 3, right? Where the challenge is really actually intrinsic to the game. Part of the fun comes from how difficult it is. And if you made that easier, it wouldn't necessarily be an improvement. I think there's ways that it could be more accessible, and a different subset of people might like it as good or better, definitely better than they do now. But the challenge is actually intrinsic to it, so making it easier wouldn't necessarily make it better, because the challenge is part of it. But in aspects, I think for people specifically, when it's frustrating, when it's not just challenging,
there's that F word again.
Yeah, it's when it's something that's, instead of feeling like a challenge to overcome, it just feels like a box that you need to check. You know what I mean?
Right.
Where it's more like busy work, and especially when it's difficult, it's busy work that seems to have like an arbitrary amount of time that it's going to take you to do it, or
so time, maybe it's the cost. Like if you end up spending resources, whether it's your own time or resources in the game, and then you realize that if you just waited, you could have saved yourself spending those resources, and you would have just had them in hand and still be past that barrier. That's frustrating.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you still have to take into account what the challenge is supposed to be and what you're expecting to do with it, because for some people, like, again, I think going back to the Dark Souls model, you might have put way more time into it while it was harder, but if it became super, super easy, I don't feel like you would have been gypped. feel like you still would, it's still definitely for the people who like the challenge would have an understanding that they actually got to play in the way that they enjoyed the most. So I think you have to be spending resources, and you have to be spending resources because you have to progress, or you have to do this thing, not that you want to. Because I think,
yeah, so I guess we're two sides of the same coin, because the idea to actually not be frustrated afterwards is that you're you don't feel like you're wasting resources. You're spending it in a way that is actually of value to you.
Yeah. No, so I agree. Yeah, I think that's actually a decent framework to contextualize it. Because if you enjoy the time that you spent with it, it's not going to be bad. I think it's going to be bad when it was frustrating and you did it anyways because you thought you had no other options, and there was a third secret hidden option that was just wait time, and in exchange for not having to do whatever it is you had to do to surmount the obstacle.
See, what's interesting to me is that this is adjacent to that conversation that I see a lot of forums where people are leaving Injustice because they get bored of it, and they do it in a bit of a flounce, right? They make a big announcement that they're leaving. And that's not awful, but it just reminds you of those times where people get into an argument that they can't win, and they say, oh, I'm not commenting again, but then, they come back, right?
Oh, yeah. See, I watched a really good video. I don't know why this reminded me of that, but I watched a really good video by the YouTuber Philosophy Tube. He's a left tuber.
What's a left tuber?
It's like the left-wing sphere of like political YouTube channels.
Like socially left-wing or financially?
Like politically.
Politically, but you know how even politically there's an element of it that's socially, like you can be social conservative, but a fiscal, I don't know, liberal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I think he's left-wing pretty all across the board. Okay. But it was on Steve Bannon, and he talked about the argumentative tactic where people are trying to basically be able to dismiss somebody else as not addressing their argument, and he described it with a really good metaphor. He was like, it's like cigarette companies saying smoking makes you cool, and then you say, yeah, but they cause cancer, and the cigarette company says, yeah, but why won't you debate us on the cool part?
Right.
So I don't know why what you said reminded me of that, but
it's the framing of it. It's just where you're starting from and how you're looking at it, and if you can get people to discuss it in the frame that you've chosen, which is favorable to you, then it makes it a lot easier. Yeah, but so when you said like throwing up your hands and saying I'm not gonna have this argument with you, right, is reminiscent of the why won't you talk about how cigarettes make you cool? Why are you focusing on the cancer? Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why we can still play it is that for different reasons, the game itself, but also the fact that we're doing a YouTube channel makes this not nearly as frustrating as it could be.
Yeah.
Is that F word again?
There we go. Yeah, our next question, and this is a set of 2 questions, but I think we're going to break them up a little bit because they're similar, but they're not quite the same.
And it's from the same person.
Comes from Shim Sham. And so Shim Sham asks, what's the best damage over time character and with what gear?
Okay, so before you can answer that, I think you have to address, there's different damage over time, and my absolute 100% favorite damage over time is bleeding. Because the bleeding not only has the damage over time, but has the takes extra damage effect.
Yeah.
And so that 20% extra damage stacks even on the bleed itself. So the second and third bleeds are doing more damage.
Yeah, which is great. If you could just use specials forever, that would be a exponential increase.
Right. So when in a very narrow time frame, other damage is doing more too, right? So to me, the best damage over time character does bleed damage, but also does it on special 1 because it doesn't take a lot of power to do it. And so the thing is, when you have a damage over time special, the special is reduced for what it would otherwise be for a character of that much damage to take into account the effect.
Yeah.
So if they can tag out and rinse the damage, then you don't get the full benefit of the damage over time, and it still costs you the same damage reduction of your special. So to me, the best is a tie between Arkham Knight Catwoman, because her damage is unrinsable. She's got a bleed special or bleed damage on special 1. And Injustice 2 Aquaman, because if he takes damage over time, he can bring it back twofold. So I think, to me, those are the 2 best damage over time characters.
Yeah. And then our next question comes from Shim Sham, which is like the companion question. What are the best gears for damage over time specialists? So we've told you what characters to use. Now we're telling you how to gear them.
And I guess too, I mean, it depends on your team. Arkham Knight, Catwoman, and Injustice 2 Aquaman can't be on every team, but it's the reason why we've got Injustice 2 Aquaman on our Justice League team that you're watching right now.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I mean, a damage over time specialist is really a sub-specialist, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a subset of the special specialists, and that means you've got more than a few options, right? So for a special specialist, you need to have power. If you don't have power, you're not doing your specials, you're not doing damage over time, it doesn't really matter. So either through gears that generate more power or that give you power on tag in, or teammates. In this team, you can see it's New 52 Wonder Woman. Suicide Squad Harley Quinn, I believe, on her special 2 can give power, so you could potentially give your whole team power. If you have Tentu Totem, do the give power over and over again until everybody's at 3 bars.
Yeah.
And then tag out and let everybody do the specials, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, yeah, so you could give them power gen gears. You could give them gears that increase damage over time.
Yeah.
So there's a few pieces, like I think the League of Assassins Adept Blade, Iba Stick, one of the LexCorp gears. I can't remember whether it's helmet or chest.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you.
Or whatever. It just gives extra damage over time. Mm-hmm. And then Quake Engine, which adds damage over time. So it boosts the damage over time, but it also repeats if once the first time finishes. So that's why
which includes knockouts.
Right. So that's why it's so cool when you see it. We've got it on Injustice 2 Aquaman right now, so we get extra value for his. We get extra value because it bleeds. We're stacking it, and it comes in on the next guy if we knock him out.
Yeah, so it's impressive to watch you do the first special. You burn through a guy, and then all of a sudden, all the damage over time is still in the next one.
Right, and which is one of the reasons what makes this team, this Justice League team, so good, because so you've got the special specialist, which is the sort of the ideal one, right? With the Tentu Totem, you come and do a bunch of special 2s. For some teams, they just knock them all out, and then if you hit a bit of resistance and it doesn't knock them out, there's often you'll have done a couple specials with New 52 Wonder Woman that gives each of her teammates 2 bars of power if you do special 2 twice, right?
Yeah.
And then that means when Injustice 2 Aquaman comes in, he's got 2 special 1s. Stack the bleed. Maybe while he comes in with his invulnerability, do a few combos to see if you can get that 3rd bar of power, which doesn't happen often, but it can. And then you bleed them out like crazy.
So there we go. Our next question comes from Anonymous B, and they ask if you guys could create a fantasy gear card based on what you think the game is lacking or the current gear collection is missing, or even a caricature would benefit from. So I think you mean character there, so like a gear card geared towards a specific character. Love to hear those ideas. Great job on these podcast episodes, big fan. And podcast is in all caps because I think quite rightly Anonymous B is you claim to fame as asking for a podcast and knowing what we should do before we did
for the longest time and for consistently, right? So definitely iProphet and Edwin Felix for not only supporting us on Patreon to make this possible and asking for it. Well, asking for it before or after or whatever. But Anonymous has been doing it for the longest time and like consistently, which would normally be a little bit annoying, but no. Like ultimately it wasn't.
I don't think in that context it actually is annoying. Just because the way that they were asking was actually very respectful and just I like your stuff. It was more of just like a aspirational thing. Like you guys could do a podcast, because I think one of the issues is that we didn't really feel like we could do a podcast.
That's
not that it's like, no, podcasts are bad ideas.
I was just exaggerating for effect, and I think I went a little too far.
That's
but no, absolutely. And I actually interpret caricature as in like the character model. So I was thinking like more facial hair on Arkham Origins Batman. But maybe your interpretation is actually better. I'm not sure.
More facial hair on Arkham Origins Batman would be the worst gear effect possible. Like,
well, okay, so how about like as the fight progresses, it gets longer, right? You can visibly see it develop from like clean shaven to like 5 o'clock shadow. If you have a fight that lasts, like, it'd be one of those special things. Like if you have a fight that lasts like 10 minutes.
It was a beard meter.
Yeah.
So his beard would build up and it would do something to his abilities.
And it would be like an Easter egg where you wouldn't know this until you'd actually fought with Arkham Origins Batman in a fight that lasted more than 10 minutes. And then all of a sudden he's got like a full beard.
No, that would be a very bad ability.
All right, so here's me thinking about the question wrong then, because I was thinking that, you know, most of the character models are actually really good. Yeah. Because there's a bunch of reskins and pseudo reskins that actually turn out really well. Because, all right, so it's obvious that, you know, the different Batmen still fight really well, even though you change the way they look. But Darkseid is a reskin of Zod.
Yeah.
Right? And Darkseid still looks pretty good.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, it doesn't look like, you know, blocking. Remember, I mean, the worst of this was Virtua Fighter, the Sega game, where they used geometric shapes, but they didn't even try to make it look like people. Not really. Like, it was shaped generally like people, but they didn't do anything to hide geometric shapes. Do you remember that or no?
No.
I'm dating
not
myself.
Not at all.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Why would I remember that?
But I'm really struck by how good everything looks, and it's really comes home to me when the perspective changes because of a special or something, or it gets locked into a perspective change.
Yeah. And
it still looks really cool, even when you see something from an angle that you normally don't.
Oops, I think I just smacked my table. Hopefully that didn't come off in the audio.
Yeah. I didn't hear that. I didn't know if you hadn't told me.
Okay.
So maybe his actual question then, or sorry, Anonymous B's actual question. Mm-hmm. To me, for every good passive, there should be a card that mimics it. That would be to me the ultimate kind of gear cards.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of stuff it's hard to perceive. So for that one, like you're talking about stuff like Injustice 2 Superman's shield.
Yeah, if you were willing to give a gear slot for it,
Raven's lifesteal.
Yes, or maybe even
incredible.
Like part of it, like maybe just lifesteal once. Mm-hmm. Right, something maybe not as good. So let's say there's a two-parter, because Injustice 2 Superman has a two-parter.
Yeah.
Passive, right? So he's got the shield, but he also has a boost per level to health and damage. Amazing would be a card that gave you immunity to stun, or immunity to crit damage. I mean, you've got one that reduces it, but I mean, to be immune to crit damage would be pretty spectacular.
Wow, yeah, but
not make it the same gear.
And then we both had, I think, a separate idea that would be cool, separate from, you know, just reusing already used abilities. Do you want to give yours first?
All right, so my idea was that you could have a card that would let you be part of another team. So you could have a card that said, when you have this card on them, they count as a Red Sun. Or they count as a Flashpoint team.
Yeah. And
that would be cool.
I think that would be really awesome, yeah, because then you could spend one gear slot and make your thematic teams much more versatile. Yeah, and what I would like, and I think I mentioned this before, is I think this is kind of another example of repurposing content that's already in the game, but I think it would be interesting to be able to do something along the lines of using opposing abilities in terms of passives or gear abilities. Like, I think it would be cool if you if there's a condition that you can meet in the fight that would allow your gear to essentially absorb temporarily the abilities of either like one of their gears or like a modified version of all their gears, or just something, you know?
Ooh, how about if you knock them out, you get to absorb their passive?
Yeah, I think that would be really cool, and I think because of the way that they've pivoted to using the gears as percentages, I think what you could do is you could have your ability be, if you knock them out, or if you use a super, or use, you know, like a special, you could get their gear, and you could get their gear at what its equivalent would be, not fully upgraded. So you get to like maybe it's like it has one or two other abilities, and then the third ability is that you get like a half strength version of their gear if you hit them with the super.
That would be
like
cool.
of one of their gears, and I just think something like that would be really interesting, because it would make the fights a lot cooler, and it would also incentivize higher level play, because it would be interesting to do something like, for example, get the Astro Harness, right, and be able to steal like Astro Harness ability. in the middle of a fight, or just the farther in you are, just generally the more you get to take advantage of the higher quality gears, or like briefly having, for example, like double Tantu totem effects.
Yeah, that
where
would
like
be
you
cool.
swap in and you get 2 full bars. I think it would be,
Warner Brothers needs to hit us up. Actually, that's what they need to do.
Yeah, and what I like about that is it's not consistent enough to build a team around, but it is interesting enough that I would want to use it.
Like
So
to
I
be
think
wild, yeah.
I think it's inherently balanced, because it won't help you win fights that you're going to lose. It might, but it's not reliable enough to win a fight that you would otherwise lose. So it's not actually like significantly game breaking, but it is game changing, because it can totally switch up a fight that you would probably already have won,
Okay.
and it can slightly shift things in either direction.
You know what would be funny, and balance it even more? If you
What?
had one that would swap your passive, so you'd have to be careful about who you're knocking out that way, because you might end up
my
with a worse
goodness.
passive. Can you imagine that? You know what
That
it's
would-
like? It's like fighting with that Suicide Squad Joker, where you end up picking up somebody, but you don't actually want them because it makes a fight drag
yeah.
longer, because they have no passive and no
Yeah.
gear, and it just
And then-
means that their body.
And then the enemies just get power by beating you up, because
Yes.
you want to get knocked out.
Yes.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
would just be cruel.
But so I think the problem is actually generating fully new ideas. Like, you're changing the allegiance is actually like a really, really cool idea, but generating totally new ideas is really difficult. And I think, to some extent that probably felt by the Injustice devs too. So I think more interesting is being able to find a way to recontextualize stuff that's already in the game, content that's already there.
Yeah. I mean, they've done it a couple times, right?
Yeah.
I think with the gear and the online play, which was not there at the beginning of the game, they've added a bunch of stuff that I was quite surprised. I mean, it's obvious to go from Elite 7 to Elite 10, but it wasn't so obvious to do it through Breakthrough.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they could still fix it, and I mean, there's still a bunch of characters that haven't had breakthroughs yet, but
Another gear that I would like would be basically the ability to equip gear to another one of your characters. So you could get, like, if there's a gear that let you give up your gear slot, it had no effects, but it had its only effect was that on one of your other like characters you could put an extra gear slot on. So you basically gave up one of yours and you traded.
All right,
would
but
be
that
really
means,
cool.
all right, so that would cost you 2 gear slots, because you would have to have 1 gear slot to put it on, and then another gear to actually be useful for the other person.
Yeah, no. So yeah, what it would do is it would use up your gear slot. It would shift your gear slot from your character to another person on your team. I think that would be really interesting.
All right, so here, you know what it reminds me of? You probably never read this. There's a fantasy book called The Rune Lords. I don't know if it was a series or not. I only read the first book by David Farland. And I think it was this book where it had the ideas that there were these lords that were so powerful, and what would make them powerful is that they would have these people that were their vassals, maybe. I don't know what the term was, but they would give up their power and be so vulnerable, but then the Rune Lord would be really super powerful. And so then the fights were no longer the Rune Lords against each other. It was trying to pick off all their vassals, like basically their human batteries.
That's really interesting. See, there's a lot of interesting dynamics like that. I think again, this is like a really tangential reminder, but there's this game called EVE Online, and it's defined by the fact that there's a huge kind of there's a really small scale economy of like independent contractors all the way up to like spaceship owners. And what happens is when you get far into the game, you can get much higher quality resources that are really, really rare at low levels. And how the game economy works is that people are basically contracting, like the rich players who have access to high quality resources are basically contracting out the poor players' time, because they can because you need insane numbers of the really easy resources that literally somebody who's just started playing can acquire, but you can only get it so fast. So what happens is the people in late game use their valuable resources for early upgrades, and they trade it for the lower level players' time. So there's a huge number of man hours going into mining like space rocks or whatever for basic resources, and then the high level players are swooping in. So it's a really interesting way of mimicking, like, the kind of like rich poor dynamic in a video game where it's all actual real people, because I don't know, there's something that feels almost demeaning about like spending like a couple of hours mining space rocks for somebody so that they can make their ship a little bigger because you're so earlier in the game, and then they give you this like pitiful amount of like high level resource because you need it, and this is the only way that you can get it.
That's capitalism at work.
Yeah. So it's only tangentially related, but there's something about the system that I find really funny and really kind of, it's like a really good critique of capitalism while kind of condoning the behavior, because it's the mechanic that you're actually, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not supposed to be like an unfun game that capitalism, it's not like a parable about capitalism that's not supposed to be fun. It's actually a game afterwards, but I just think the kind of base idea of it just feels so like really like working class labor.
That's kind of cool. I gotta check that out. You said it was Eve?
Eve Online, yeah.
Eve Online. Okay.
If I'm remembering correctly.
Oh, we got
I have never.
Sorry, you have never.
I've never played the game firsthand, so I wouldn't know.
Okay.
Do we want to?
Yeah, let's motor through. We're gonna go through these relatively. We're running out of time, but there's a few points I wanted to hit.
Okay, our next question, we're gonna go through this quick, comes from Max Ramos. I thought the Green Lantern team is immune to stun.
And it's not. All right, so that's Red Sun Green Lantern for Red Suns, and it is immune to stun if that's all that's happening. But if it's the beginning or part of a special, the stun still takes. Now,
because specials are like a very specific combo, so they're like an exception to the rule.
She'll never get a chance to break from the stun, basically. The problem is with, say, Batgirl, her special 1, they're still stunned, but they're not crit. So it doesn't do nearly as much damage as you need it to, because it's still only a special 1. And so for Lucha Urbane's Taggin, for example, it's meant to stun, but then you recover for it before you can do anything. So it's almost like discrete little chunks of things where the stun in the middle of a special doesn't count the same way, where you can recover, but the stun that finishes something will be recoverable from.
So our next question comes from Drake Pendragon, and this isn't really a question, this is more of another long comment, and I think what we're going to do is we're going to stop at parts in the middle to address points one by one, just for clarity. So Coates is such a racist with the majority. I should say here that this is Drake talking. The views expressed hereafter are not indicative of my personal points of view. I'm simply narrating the following. Coates is such a racist with the majority of the things he has done. I can't tolerate this stuff, he says. If he wants to be pissed about language, maybe he should move somewhere that there isn't freedom of speech. And he has issues with white folks using the N-word, but he doesn't speak against black people using the word cracker. Either he's offended with language and needs to get out of the USA, or suck it up. And I think the first thing, and kind of the most obvious, is that in your comment, you kind of demonstrate the fact that this is a false dichotomy yourself, because you say the N-word and don't use the actual word, and I'm not either, because, you know, it's not an acceptable word for me to say. But when I'm reading your comment, and also when you're writing your comment, we're both okay with the use of cracker. It's not equivalent.
Because we know that. Like, there's, you know, there's something... All right, so here's the thing. Free speech is a bit of a weird thing, it seems to me, for Americans. It's almost like a fetish for the First Amendment, free speech, the same way there's a fetish for the Second Amendment, which is guns. I mean, in Canada... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, just at the end of the day, it's a totally false dichotomy. I think it's a sort of bad faith argument, because nobody ever used cracker as a term to describe white people while they were enslaving them, and that's a totally
that's the key, right? While they were enslaving them.
Yeah, like, it was derogatory and demeaning, and these people were literally considered property. And cracker is I mean, I don't get to speak on behalf of white people for this, no more than anybody gets to speak on behalf of their race as a whole. But I find the term cracker pretty funny, actually.
All right, so, but here's the thing. All right, so cracker has been used as a pejorative for poor white people. So the negative connotation, I think, is stronger for the poor, you know, the socioeconomic part, than it is for the race part.
Yeah.
But you hit the nail right on the head, right? It's the key is the difference between oppressor and oppressed. Which kind of fits actually a little bit with cracker, because it's a bit of like a socioeconomic kind of oppression, right? But that also means that white people have used the term cracker as an insult against other white people. So it's basically the rich hating on the poor, while being specific about how it's the white poor, right? And I'm gonna maybe play a little bit or work a little bit with the whole point about the attack on Coates, because I think that's not entirely fair, because I think it's a mischaracterization to say Coates is against free speech, when what he was saying, at least, you know, if we're talking about him as the entry point was when I mentioned something about him last week, is that he's explaining why it's inappropriate to use the N-word if you're not black. And telling someone that they're rude or inappropriate in the choice of words is the exact opposite of free speech. It is exercising more free speech.
Yeah, it is an appropriate response, because free speech is, you know, like, protected by governments, but this is an individual person expressing their opinion. And I think analysis of our day-to-day, I mean, at the end of the day, there's nothing that he can do to make you stop, and he's not attempting to make every individual person stop. I mean, that's a decent goal, is to make white people stop using the N-word, because really, you should.
Right, but, and it's not even like a explicit, it's not like, well, it is. It says there's definitely a strongly implied criticism of the use of the N-word, by not black people, by white people, but it's an explanation, right? It's, you know, this is why it doesn't work so great. So yeah, I have so much trouble getting offended by that. And how, to me, that, I mean, maybe it is because in Canada, like, we actually have limits on gun ownership, and we have limits on free speech when it's hate speech, that to me, it seems just so obviously a good thing to say, hey, not so cool, and this is why it's not so cool, instead of just saying, you really shouldn't do that. I mean, even if somebody said you really shouldn't do that, that wouldn't be infringing against free speech. That would just be somebody else's opinion, just not well explained.
Yeah, and so I think, just in terms of time, I mean, there's more we could talk about this, but I think we should just move on to the next point, because there's more to talk about here too. It isn't anti-women's rights, it is pro-life. What about the choice of the potential father? There should be stigma against terminating a life with abortion, just like there is a stigma around ending the life of anyone who is already born. And so that's the next kind of chunk of what he's said here.
So what's funny about that is how immediately after talking about free speech, and Coach should leave the U.S. if he doesn't like free speech, we get, it isn't anti-women's rights, it's pro-life. It's literally an acknowledgement that, like we've been saying, words matter. The words you use matter. And the reason, I mean, I generally like to use the terms that people use to refer to themselves, but the problem is, it literally is pro-birth. If the only point of any legislation they've got is to force women to give birth, to make it more difficult for women to have abortions, with nothing to support the child that's born, to support children at the border, to make it easier to get birth control so you don't have to have an unwanted pregnancy. I mean, so here's the thing. People can be pro-life, right?
I think one thing that might be important is for us to take a step back and actually address this on our most basic level, because I think we can see in this question inherently, in the response to us, a bit of the muddying of the waters. There's a bunch of kind of fronts being addressed all at once, right? You talk about having stigma against terminating life, but you also talk about the choice of the potential father. And I think on a fundamental level, the most basic argument that we are making is that ultimately abortion should be a choice, and it is a fundamentally personal choice. And, you know, in relationships, I think you do actually need to make sure that you know, there's obviously certain situations that you can discuss where the rights of the father are important to consider, and that's makes it really, really complicated. But we're not talking about people who are interested in abortion and just kind of changing the legislature. And I think a lot of the times the people that were like arguing against the point that we're making a counterpoint to isn't people who are saying, oh, well, the only thing that I'm concerned about is the rights of the father. It's people who don't want abortion to be possible, period. Right. So I think that's shifting the actual goalposts of the argument, and I think there is something to be said for that in specific context, but I'm not a policymaker, and at the end of the day, it's not my job to figure that out. What I'm saying is that abortion should be a right, and that people who are smarter than me and who actually like can figure out the best way to go about what is, you know, obviously a very kind of difficult legal and legislative kind of knot to untangle should be making those decisions. But at the end of the day, I think abortion should be right, and that's kind of on a fundamental level the stance that I'm taking, which is a little bit different than what you're kind of trying to argue against us here.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for us to establish that.
I completely agree with you. And I think it becomes much more obvious, too, like you pointed out, when we're talking about legislation, that I'm definitely totally on the side of having the choice. But it's very telling when the people that are legislating for making abortions more difficult do absolutely nothing to tie that into, whether it's in the legislation itself or whether it's in related legislation that they can bring but they never do. Universal health care, accessible contraception, like I said, sex education, a livable minimum wage, free tuition to post-secondary school. All those things are pro-life, like real life, right? Where people get people who are living, who then they don't need as many abortions. That the life that they live can be more meaningful, and I mean, it's all part of it, right? And maybe I'm telling on myself a little bit, right? Because listen, we're Canada. Our Canadian right on the political spectrum is still like far left in the U.S. So,
and I think it's interesting that Drake Pendragon chooses to use the word stigma here when talking about stigma against terminating life with an abortion, because stigma is used in a context which almost exclusively means this is a thing that we don't talk about and we should. You know, or this is a thing that there is shame about and there shouldn't be. The use of the term stigma generally refers to something that is actually not as bad as it is made out to be. Right. So I think there already is a stigma about abortion, and the fact that abortion doctors are literally hunted down and killed in America is a pretty good indication that there still is that stigma. But I think from a scientific perspective, from a meaningful perspective, it's different, you know, because it's hard to kind of ignore theistic ideology. But I think when you're looking at other people's safety and well-being, sometimes it's maybe necessary to not disrespect them specifically, but to not let their beliefs be applied kind of en masse to other people. Where I don't think it is an equivalent thing, and I don't think it actually should be, you know, equally shamed to get an abortion versus killing a person. And you know, I mean, that's
and the fundamental problem with killing a person isn't shame. Right? I mean, if that's where you're going, you're sort of missing the point.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think at the end of the day, whatever, we're at the end of our time here, so I guess we have to wrap it up. But as far as the same stigma against having an abortion as there is about ending the life of somebody who's already born, I think that stems from just a fundamental disagreement on what it is that's happening. Because kind of framing it in terms of killing somebody feels to me just inaccurate, and not comparable.
For sure.
Okay, we don't have time to address the rest of this.
Maybe we'll save it for next time. Because it's interesting, and I'm gonna tease for what I want to talk about next time is the idea of a Gish Gallop argument.
Okay, so there we go. That's a little bit of a teaser. Stay tuned for part 2. So before we end, we have a Patreon. You can support us at patreon.com/BDCKR if you want to toss a couple of bucks our way every month. And as always, a huge thank you to our current patrons. You want to take it away?
Yeah, so thanks to Console Peasant, Eddy G, and Edwin Felix, who are supporting us at the highest last word tier. iProphet, who is supporting us, also known as iProphet 3, who is supporting us at the Your Message Here tier, which he's taking advantage of this week with his... Oh
no. You know what? iProphet is sharing a joke with us. The segment doesn't always need a name. This is just a joke from iProphet, from him to you, unfiltered. There's no artifice. This is just a heart to heart. And here is his message. Why did Commissioner Gordon fail on his date?
Why did Commissioner Gordon fail on his date?
He kept giving her bat signals. This one, I gotta say, it's just as funny, but it just feels worse, you know? You know, this is really a groaner pun, and I still appreciate it. It's still entertaining, but it hurt a little to say.
You know what's weird to me? To me, it's one of those jokes where you see it in a cartoon and you think, oh, that's kind of funny. And a lot of it might go over like the kids' heads, because here's the thing. So if he's going on a date and it could be you're playing on the words bat and bad, or you could be playing on the idea that somehow he's, you know, signaling Batman that he needs help.
I didn't get that.
So it's, you know,
this is, oh wow,
it works on a few different levels, right?
Does it? I don't know. Okay. So iProphet sent us a message, and then we also have Daniel Simonson and Shawn Farrell, who are supporting us on the credited supporter tier, and not to mention Chris Wolf and Laszlo Georgiades, who are supporting us on the gratitude tier. So thank you so much for sticking with us through all this. And right at the end, an analysis of a joke, and I'm still not entirely convinced your reading is accurate there.
I'm just making it up as I go along.
You know what? That's fair, aren't we all? Thank you all so much for watching or listening, depending on your platform of choice. We will see you next time, or hear from you next time.
Or you hear us next time.
Or you'll hear us next time. You will see us, but not us, the video content we produce, or you will not see the video content we produce. You'll exclusively hear us, but no matter which platform you consume this content on, you will hear us. The audio will always reach you, and you will consume our content next time.
Komoda.